live in a world where it seems like cruelty is much worse than what it was maybe when you and I were your daughter's age.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever have like thoughts or feelings of like at some point someone's going to be an asshole?
Yeah.
And I mean, does that run through your head at all? Like how she's going to react to it and how can you prepare her for that?
Yeah. I think at a younger age, when she's, that's actually really tough. When she's kind of able to cognitively understand it, just kind of have a very real and straightforward conversation with her. Like, not to get too worked up here, like you are different than everybody else. And that's a fact. Like that's what it is. And that's okay. Yeah. It's okay to be different. But you just need to understand that you are, and that's just the hand you were dealt. And that's fine. It's a challenge. We'll figure it out. Thankfully, we have, the means, to take care of her, and loving parents and loving family and, big wide family. And, as she gets older, she's going to have whatever the hell she wants. Right. I mean, she's going to go to college. She's going to do all those things. We met a person that has OI. She's 35 now. She works for NASA. She's married, went to A&M. Great example of like what you can do with this. And there's more severe cases of it too. Like Anna's only had I think she's had like 8 to 10 breaks since the womb, or since coming out. There's some kids that have 60 breaks a year, 100 breaks a year. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine? So you really put it in perspective that like, this is hard and this sucks. But it's not the end of the world, right? I mean, she's a strong girl. She's super smart. She does all her things. She has all the means to do these things. She's got her little wheelchair, and the goal is that she'll be like maybe in like a walker, or maybe walk on her own someday, with a cane or something, right? I'm not just like giving up, on that. And I think that was probably the hard part with going through the hospital and everything else. There was a lot of sympathy, which is fine, I've never been one for like sympathy or like hand. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry this has happened to you. I'm like, well, don't be sorry. Like help me.
Yeah.
Like I don't need and not that I'm not grateful for, but like, I don't need your sympathy. Like, I just need you to help me, like help us do this thing. Like treat her like any other kid, because she is like any other kid. Right. That was, so I'm saying all that, and that her case is not mild, it's kind of middle of the road for OI, because some OI patients are like you and I, like, and you don't even know that you have it unless you like, you or I'll step off a curb and we'll twist our ankle, but an OI patient would like break their ankle, right? Very, very mild cases of it, and there's very severe cases like I talked about. And so it really puts it in perspective that like, and I don't want to, how do I say this? I don't want to take away from anybody else's burdens, especially with their kids, but there are kids with cancer out there. There are kids with afflictions and things that are very severe, very debilitating. And I almost hate to say this, but like we don't have those issues. We don't have those very serious issues. We go to the infusion center every 6 weeks, I think, to get the permethrin. It's crazy. It's a 4-hour infusion. It's actually really small doses, but they shit ton of saline in there, and it goes over 4 hours. So imagine keeping like a 3-year-old still for like for 4 hours, and it's a lot of iPhone and games and everything else. And so we go to the infusion center at Cook's.
Welcome to Winning Strategies Playbook, the podcast where we welcome business leaders, CEOs, and industry experts to discuss the rise to the top, building wealth, and real estate insights. Here's your host, Jeremy Spann.
Welcome to Winning Strategies Playbook. And for more information, go to myexperiencedrealtor.com. That's with an ED, myexperiencedrealtor.com. When you get to the landing page, top right corner, there's a little button called podcast. You click on that, and you can scroll down and either listen to these episodes on the web domain, or you can download whatever preferred platform you have, Amazon, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. And there's also a read more button, so that way you can learn more on great guests like we have today. Jared Clark. Welcome, Jared. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me, man. Great way to start off 2021, I think. So,
2021, right? Now that we got the 2020 post-pandemic rioting, protesting, election year trifecta behind us, and let's not forget the hurricanes and fires, right?
Yeah, all that lumped together. Ready to kick off this year, and like I said, this is a great way to do it. Thanks for having me, man. This is awesome. So
I love that you came in here. I knew when I was going to start this series that I knew at some point I wanted to get you in here. But I also realized that in the last several months, you might have had a thing or two on your plate.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
You being a business owner in 2020 is fantastic, right?
Yeah. Nobody's been immune to any of this stuff going on, right? So it's definitely the energy space has been tough, putting it lightly. So
oh yeah. Well, you and I have a lot of things in common. Knowing each other from the Fort Worth Club, you being just a great supporter of Cowtown Warriors and many other charities, but we also share daughters. So I've got to start all these off with a joke. So I got a joke for you. Ready for this?
Let me hear it.
All right, here we go. I'm sure this is the first time you've heard this.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What do you call your daughter's boyfriend when he brings her back after 10 p.m.?
Late?
You call an ambulance.
All right. Yep.
Yeah. Even if you hadn't heard that before, I'm sure there's somewhere in the back of your head you thought about that before, right?
Well, the dad jokes come out, hard now with daughters and all that fun stuff. So yeah.
Oh yeah.
Never get tired of it. So.
No. Especially since mine's turning 20 this Friday. Can you believe that?
That's scary.
That makes me feel just like really, really ancient to know that my daughter's turning 20.
Yeah.
And I still like to call her Wikipedia because she knows every damn thing.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah. She knows a lot more than you do, Dad.
What do I know?
Yeah.
I'm getting close to 50. What would I know about this planet after being on here for a half a millennium?
Yeah.
God, that really sounds horrible.
That sounds, that's...
Man, is that... Oh, yeah, you get to do great things. Well, so for the audience, let's talk about you. Where do you come from? What do you do? You're a business owner. Tell us about you.
So Jared Clark, like Jeremy said, me and my business partner, Judson Culpepper, run a oil and gas brokerage land group called Forza Resources. We started that in 2009. Lots of trials and tribulations ever since. Baptism by fire, as you can imagine, diving headfirst in there. And we can get into a lot of those details later. But originally from Kansas, grew up in North Dallas, which wasn't really North Dallas back then, as McKinney. Texas, that was the hometown, and don't get back there too often, but got my roots here in Fort Worth, and I'm glad to be here and definitely going to stay here for as long as I can.
What made you pick Fort Worth?
I worked here post-college. It's where I met my business partner now, back in the Barnett heyday. I became a landman. Had no clue what I was doing at all. Learned along the way and figured some things out, I think, to today. But moved to East Texas when we started Forza, then moved to College Station, kind of moved all over and just kind of a nomad. And then, but I'd always told myself I just fell in love with Fort Worth, and I always wanted to get back here. And the first opportunity I could, I took it. And that was actually in the 14-15 downturn. Things weren't looking too hot for Forza, and me and my partner, and we had to scale down tremendously from how many people were working for us down to just a handful of us. And that was my cue. I was like, I'm getting back to Fort Worth. I just love this town. So
you came back to Fort Worth after the oil crash in 14?
Yeah, it would have been. I think it was 14 when I came back. So and best decision by far I've ever made, both personally, professionally. Personally, just because got married and all that fun stuff, and then the connections I've made in Fort Worth. It's just a very genuine, open town. It's conservative, but it's progressive in a sense that we're kind of open-minded to pretty much anything as long as it makes sense. Still got that cowtown heritage that I just love. I just love showing off this town. When people come, and it's kind of hard to describe exactly what I love totally about it, but I just knew that this is where I wanted to make my roots, and it's just a very Texas town too, as opposed to Dallas, Houston, Austin. It's hard to really even call those cities, Texas-y these days, and so I think
especially
Fort Worth,
Austin, right?
Yeah, what do they call it? The blueberry and the tomato soup or whatever.
The blueberry. And the
tomato soup. I had heard that. I don't know who said that, but Fort Worth is it kind of embodies all the things that still is Texas, and I just love that about it. So
and one of the things when I think of you is you are absolutely one of the most approachable guys I've ever met. Matter of fact, no one's ever said a bad word about it. I think, especially in Fort Worth, biggest small town ever.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's
totally.
so incestual that it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And, you could tell a lot about somebody is what do people say about that person when that person's not around. Right?
It scares the hell out of me.
Oh, no.
No, I'm just kidding.
Your name in any sentence has always come with an incredible amount of positivity.
I hope, hope so.
And one of those things is you're described as having one of the biggest hearts there is, like a heart size of Texas. And one of the things that I know about you is your generosity of charities and what you've done to involve yourself, whether it was the deal that's done up at the Fort Worth Club for the library.
Yeah.
I know you invited me to come. It seemed like every time you invited me to that,
Smoker
I was
night.
traveling.
That's a great event, man. Yeah.
And then Cowtown Warriors, and you're just one of the most generous guys that I know.
Try to be. You know me, man. I'm pretty social. I like being involved and stuff. But some of the biggest involvements besides library and Cowtown is Cook Children's, because our daughter, we spend a lot of time there and everything, and so it's just, I don't know. I get a sense of doing something, sense of purpose when we get involved with things like that and actually helping out. And you kind of know, like, my background with Cowtown. Both my parents were, kind of a little history here. Both my parents were Air Force brats, and so we grew up in like a pseudo military. I wouldn't say a military family necessarily, but just a big appreciation for that. Both my granddads were Army Air Corps and then became Air Force. World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and just a big appreciation and affinity for what service members do, like yourself. And I almost joined the military, and back in 9/11, I was right out of high school, and part of me still kind of regrets a little bit of that to this day. I tell my wife, I think the minimum for age on active duty is like 34. I think they raised it, and so I'm past 34 now. But I keep threatening my wife with hey, I just want to join the Army and go fly helicopters or something. If
barrels of oil will keep going down, I'll enlist in the military.
Yeah. Well, hey, we're at $50 today, so that's actually a big win. But
and you brought Blake Harris to one of the events.
Blake's a fantastic guy. I love that guy.
And Blake used to work for you, right?
Yeah, he did. He worked for Forza down in College Station. Fantastic guy, level-headed, former Marine, and we kind of connected pretty quickly, and he helped me out with a lot of with an industry group that we put together down there, and then he moved to Dallas. I moved to Fort Worth, and we still keep up pretty well. Just solid guy. I love that guy.
Yeah, so. And that's how I got to know Blake. Was you brought him to one of the Cowtown Warrior balls?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
And then when we found out he was a Marine, he's a very sharp guy. We suckered him into becoming a board member, where he's still a board member of Cowtown Warriors today, and he's added just an incredible amount of value. And that's one of the magical things about Fort Worth, right? Is you get to meet people some way, some form or fashion that ends up connecting things to become just absolutely magical. The value he's added, the energy he's brought, the level-headedness and logic thinking. He's a very logical thinker, right?
East Texas guy.
Right?
Salt of the earth,
right there behind the pine curtain.
Oh yeah.
And he was able to really help Cowtown not only become successful, but in a post-pandemic world, continue to be successful. And so would have never met him if it wasn't for you. And that's the power of network in Fort Worth, right? Is sure you have networks all over the planet, but there's something about Fort Worth where it is not what you know, it is who you know. Your network is your net worth here in Fort Worth.
I couldn't agree more. I think, no matter what job you have, blue collar job, white collar, 8 to 5 hour, hourly job, whatever it is, kind of gone are the days you just kind of pick up the phone book and find somebody. Like if nobody knows you exist, then they're not going to call you. Right. Again, no matter what you do, if you're a landman, an engineer, Marine, whatever it is, kind of gone are those days. And so if and word of mouth recommendations are always tenfold more than anything else. It's just like you go on Yelp and Google reviews and all this stuff. Like, you're going to look at some of these reviews. Oh, this has 5 stars, this 4 stars, 3 stars. It's always word of mouth that's going to get you kind of where you want to be and who you want to talk to. So, it's just not as easy as opening the phone book any day and then here's the plumber I'm going to hire. It's always, hey, Jeremy, you got a good plumber I can call, and that's it, and that's it. So,
yeah. So you're in Fort Worth. You relocate your business here.
So caveat to that. So we have the office here in Fort Worth, and then my partner runs the East Texas office.
Gotcha.
Primarily focused on East Texas, Louisiana. And I kind of have everything else. There's a lot of cross-pollination between the offices. It's a lot smaller office here. So most of the boots on the ground are out there. But like I said, he handles most of the East Texas, Louisiana stuff, and I kind of have everything else. It's like South Texas, West Texas, Mid-Con, Illinois, the renewable stuff. We help each other out constantly, but that's kind of the demarcation between the offices. So
okay,
yeah.
So you're here in 14.
Mm-hmm.
The oil industry is just plummeted.
Yeah.
What do you do? I mean, as a business owner owning this company, what do you do through something like that?
So just for like a sense of scale, and everybody else in the business experienced this too, and some maybe weren't as fortunate, unfortunately, but we had roughly 150 guys working for us, and we went down to like three to five, I think is what it was. Like me and my partner and a couple other guys, and I mean, talk about a hit, right? And we had a couple of small projects that kind of keep us going, and the thing that really kept us going is knowing people to reach out to and talk to and connect with, and even during downturns, there's always opportunity, right? There's always things going on, buy low, sell high type thing, and that's what's happening right now. Despite all these articles you read of the death of big oil and the end of big oil, I'm sorry, that's just, I don't know if I should mark my words here on the podcast, but like it greatly exaggerated. Everything is because of oil and gas. It just is.
Yeah.
Everything. It's not so much energy production and driving cars and flying planes. It's materials and production, and everything in here is made of some sort of plastic or epoxy or. And so with that said, you're seeing a ton of acquisitions and mergers happen all over the place. Big companies buying small companies getting backed and throwing money around. I mean, the ticker comes through every day. I keep up with this stuff, and I'm just blown away at how much money is being thrown around and to purchase all this stuff. I was talking to some guys today about a big purchase in East Texas. Again, you read the news, MSNBC, Bloomberg, whatever. You just think all's lost and oil's going away. It's not going away. There's a big push for natural gas right now too. I mean, that's going to be, depending on how the administration goes, the transition energy, which I think is a great idea. We tried doing that in 2008, before that downturn. But I think it's got some teeth this time. And so there's a lot of focus on the gas rich areas like East Texas and Louisiana, the Haynesville, Cotton Valley and those areas. So, kind of circling back to your question, there's a lot of opportunity even in those downturns. So we basically just aligned ourselves with those groups that were taking advantage of those depressed prices and things like that. The mineral buyers fall out of the woodworks when prices are low. I mean, we get calls constantly from mineral buyers looking to identify minerals, pick them up. We'll go buy them for them, flip them.
Buy them
on
the cheap.
Exactly.
So what exactly does your company do?
Okay. So for everybody in the business, we're a land brokerage. We essentially we acquire for our clients, operators, oil and gas operators, the right to drill land legally. It's kind of like a really general term there. But from start to finish, we identify an area, or our client or operator identifies an area that they want to go develop oil and gas. And so we will research the mineral owners, the surface owners, contact those owners, negotiate oil and gas leases, figure out unit declarations, regulatory issues that come with that, negotiate pipeline, surface use agreements, right-of-ways. A lot of title research is done with that. So you have a lot of guys that are in the courthouse researching the history of the tracts of land on who owns the minerals. So mineral estate and surface estate are two separate things, right? So just because you own your house on the top doesn't mean you own the minerals underneath, right? It's a big deal in America. I think America is one of 3 countries in the world where private property ownership is paramount. It's kind of right there at the top. Every other country in the world, the minerals are sovereign. So if you live in the UK and they want to drill a well in your backyard, they can just go do it, and you really have no recourse for it. So in America, you have property rights, independent rights, which is fantastic. There's only a couple other countries in the world, I believe, that you have those rights. So so with that, we have to approach the mineral owners and negotiate an oil and gas lease, which gives our client, typically an operator, the right to drill that land and develop it, and then pay you as the mineral owner the royalties that come from the oil or gas produced. So in a nutshell, there's a whole lot more that kind of goes into that, but that's in a nutshell, that's what we do. So
well, it's funny. You touched on something that in today's current political environment, being a United States Marine Corps veteran, it hurts my heart to see how many people are disgruntled with this country because we've gotten so spoiled. They don't realize how good they have it.
I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. And something as simple as property rights, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about what rights they do or don't have or whatever. And it's like, look, you can go to just about any other country on this planet, and the amount of rights you're going to have are going to be significantly less than the rights you have here. So why are we crying, right?
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think we're all a little spoiled. I mean, you and I, admittedly, we are, right? We take it for granted that we can walk down the street and not have to worry too much about anything happening to us, depending on your political affiliation or sexual orientation, man, female, that kind of thing. You really don't have to worry about a whole lot of that. Property rights here, are huge. I was going somewhere with that. You specifically mentioned.
Just being able to live in a country where you have those rights.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that if you went somewhere else, just even a simple freedom of speech right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Or any number.
I got my mind back on track now. A good example, we'll contact some people to pay them money, say, hey, we're going to pay you a consideration, bonus consideration to execute an oil and gas lease. They're going to pay you money if oil comes out of the ground or gas comes out of the ground. I mean, you really don't have to do anything other than just sign this thing. You would be surprised how hard it is to give somebody a bag of money sometimes, and how it blows your mind. It's like
let's unpackage that. Tell me about that.
It's like you've won the lottery. In most, like I'm waiting for the day that a landman calls me and says, "Hey, you own X amount of net acres in some far-flung, North Dakota, whatever that, and we're going to pay you a giant lump sum of money. All you got to do is sign this, and we're going to do everything for you. We're going to have all the legal burden, the financial burden. We're going to bring a rig in there. We're going to have all these roughnecks, do this stuff. We're going to connect all the pipeline for you. We're going to do everything for you. And all you got to do is cast a check, every month." You would be surprised how hard it is to get people off high center with that. And that's always my analogy, right? Yeah. It's like if you walked up, on a sidewalk and there's a bag of money sitting there, are you going to keep it, or what are you just going to walk over it? What are you going to do? It's like, no, you're going to keep it, or if you won the lottery, are you just not going to cash the check? Like that's essentially what's happening here. And so, you obviously take a very tactful and nuanced approach when you're having those conversations with landowners and mineral owners. But it's just amazing sometimes that, and a lot of times because it's their ownership of those minerals a lot of times has nothing to do with what they did individually in their life, like the decisions and choices they made. Sometimes they bought the minerals, right? Sometimes they inherited that kind of thing. Yeah. But a lot of times the reason they own the minerals is because their granddad or great-granddad or whoever was smart enough to own these minerals or buy them or purchase them or whatever. And so they didn't have to do anything. And I'm like, well, you should be so lucky that your granddad or whoever was smart enough to do this. And all you have to do is, say yes. Now, oil and gas leases can be kind of complicated, and there's several things you have to work into these things, provisions, and I totally get that. You want to protect yourself, from being taken advantage of. Not that many standard oil and gas leases take advantage really of anybody. They're designed or I guess optimized to get the most product out of the ground the easiest way possible and to pay you and to move on to.
Which, by the way, let's not skip over. Here's a benefit that they're going to receive that not only do they not have the capability, resources, or money to go do themselves.
Exactly.
So it's just sitting there. So if you don't take advantage of it, it's not like you're going to go do it yourself. So here's somebody that's going to come take all the burden where all you got to do is somebody to hand you a check.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. I mean, and we've had those conversations. People's like, oh, well, I can hire a drilling company to do this. Like, yeah, you can, but
do you want it?
It's not easy to do that. And anyway, so absolutely. Yeah. And so that's a little frustrating. I mean, it's rare we come across stuff like that, but yeah, sometimes you just want to like shake these people. Like we are handing you a boatload of cash. And anyway. So.
And what other country, like you said, can you live in that based on the property that you own, someone's going to show up with a bag of money and it's still your property?
Yeah. It's different from like cultivating land, right? Running cattle or, growing cotton or corn or whatever. We're like, you got to put a lot of legwork into it. It's like, you literally don't have to do anything other than just let these come. It's different when you own the surface also, because they have rigs out there and they got people out there. And I get that. And especially if you are running cattle and if you are cultivating the land, if the land's used, hunting leases, things like that, you don't want it to interrupt the activities that you have going there. And all that factors into the negotiations and everything. So that's
Sure.
actually kind of a small part of what we do. There's so many other things on top of that. There's massive mapping projects we have to do to kind of map all this stuff out. There's regulatory issues with the Railroad Commission that we have to take into account before we put these things in place and build them. Division orders, who gets paid what, separating out royalties and things like that. So that's really just kind of like a small piece, the purchasing of the oil and gas leases. But I guess it's the most in the spotlight, so
Right.
it's what gets the most attention. So
Well, I think that's with any business, right? Is, especially now, like when I first started in a real estate business,
Mhm.
like I was chasing down anybody I could get a hold of to try to do business with. And now having just a great amount of success is people only see a part of it, right? They only see the end result.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like there's no secret. I do a lot of real estate, not just in the investment part of it of what I own myself or in partnerships with other stuff, but in selling and buying and also connecting people to agents all over the planet to make sure that they get the right representation. And so, when you can look back at a trailing 12 months and be like, oh, wow, I've closed almost $50 million worth of deals,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Which if anybody gets to do the math on that, they can realize 3% times, 40, 50 million is pretty successful.
Mhm.
And they go, wow, man, you make that easy. Will you tell me everything you do? And I'm like, well, let me explain the last 4 years. I have spent over 20,000 hours, personal hours. This doesn't include like anybody else on my team, my own hours,
Mhm.
building the processes and everything else in my business to be very good at what I do. I've also reinvested over $1 million of commissions that I've made over the last 4 years back into the business.
Mhm.
And then you have people show up and go, will you give me all that for free? And I'm like,
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
unless you want to reimburse me the 20,000 hours, which you can't reimburse time,
Sure.
or the over $1 million that I've spent to make this very effective, to deliver the value that the clients want. But it's only one part. They don't see me getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And as I say on many of these shows, people go, well, you like getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning because you were in the Marines. I'm like, no, if there's anybody who hates getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, it's me. As a business owner, I'm willing to do whatever needs to be done. But because I've done it so effectively, when COVID hit in March,
Mhm.
and just by owning several different businesses, the restaurant, other investments and so forth, but with the real estate team, the team naturally was concerned, like, what do we do? The pandemic's here, all sales have shut down. What do we do? And I said, because I've been smart in business, even if we didn't sell another house in 2020, I could still pay you throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And that was a good feeling that I had to be able to reassure the people that were working for me. But again, it goes back into reinvesting into the business, having those retained earnings, being able to deploy that business acumen I've gotten through either experience, my undergrad, my MBA from TCU, whatever, to be able
Sure.
to go, I'm in a safe place to be able to go do this. Now, the reason I say this is I want to go back to something you said is in 2014, you had a bit of a different experience when you had to look at over 100 people and say, things just crashed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what was that feeling like to
Man.
look at people that you cared about and go, I got to let you go? What was
Sorry.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was I'm actually glad you said that. That was probably the most trying, difficult time in my career. And my partner Jed was doing the same thing in East Texas on his project over there. Same exact thing. He had about 75 guys, had about 80. So that was kind of split. So same conversation was happening, separate places, and we're calling each other in between. These. Hey, everyone, come in big room. Everyone knows kind of what's going on, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the oil just tanked, and we were working for a great client at the time, fantastic client. They pay well, they pay on time, hard workers. Hardworking guys though, drill fantastic wells, but they're slave drivers, right? They expect you ride for the brand when you work for them, and you really don't. They don't want you working for anybody else while you're doing that either,
Mm-hmm.
which is an interesting thing in this business, which has changed, and I can kind of get to that later, but so to see them hurting, and scaling back, like, crap, shit, here we go,
Yeah.
So calling in, I think 30 guys on one swoop, and then an additional 20 or something on the second one, and just having to look at all these guys in the face. It's like, it's nothing you did. You guys are fantastic. We run a well-oiled machine here, and it worked really, really well, and very successful development program. and just like, sorry, we have nothing else for you. And like I said, a lot of them expected it, and most everybody, I'd say probably 95% of them totally get it. We're totally appreciative of it. Like, hey, it's not you. We totally get that. We'll close out what we're doing, move on. A lot of those guys are still in the business, and so we've actually circled back to several of these guys that we've made some really great relationships with, and brought them back on. So it's actually worked really, really well. But yeah, that was really tough, and having to tell them that. And I remember distinctly, and I don't know how many people I've told this story, but my admin, her name was Nikki. She was awesome. She just like kept me straight through all that, through that big project there. Cause it's hard to run that many guys. I mean, you've got 75, 80 guys running. I mean, dude, you're just like herding cats, babysitting adults. You've heard all the phrases, right? Like, I mean, you know how it is. And just like with anything else, you're dealing with these different personalities, and some guys are really good at some things and other guys are really good at other things. And you can put a lot of pressure on some and they react really well to it. You tell them the sky's falling and they get their ass in gear, and you got other people who kind of have to coddle a little bit, and that's fine. You just have to kind of know what makes them tick and to keep them running, because you don't want to interrupt their productivity and all that kind of stuff. So, so Nikki was a huge part of that. And, I remember after that first, let go of 30 something guys, I was like, hey, I told Nikki, I was like, hey, we come to my office real quick. And I know this was the afternoon. I was like, I literally took a shot of Jameson just to like calm my nerves. Like, and I was like, will you just like sit here with me and just like keep me? Cause I've never had to do it before. I've never had to fire 30 something people or 70 something people. Now I've had to let go of people that deserve it. Right. That's an easier, hey, see you later.
Go, right?
Yeah. Sorry.
But when it's not their fault.
Yeah. 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 It's so much easier when they deserve it. Like, get at it. Thanks. Thanks, but whatever. So that was tough, man. So that was tough. Yeah, it sucked. I don't know how else to say it.
Well, the one thing I could say about 2014, and even though my industry is a little bit different, is that was the experience when I saw how many of my friends that own companies that had to have those uncomfortable conversations, and I was like, fast forward to whenever I was building the Spann group out, is I was like, man, I'm going to build this thing out at the people that I take on. Is watching that. I want to try to do everything I can to alleviate ever having to be in that position, because I can't tell you how many conversations with friends like you that I had, that just hearing just the hurt in your voice of having to have those conversations just was, like I never wanted to experience that. I've never had to experience that. I'm very fortunate I've never had to experience that. And it was because I saw the pain out of you guys that I was like, I'm going to try to do everything I can to make sure I'm not in that position. And I'm not saying I might not ever be in that position, but I saw the pain from you guys, and I was like, I know that I never want to be in those shoes.
Sure.
And so I took that to get to where we are now.
Kind of position yourself in a way that, absolutely.
And so let's wind back the clock a little bit further before that.
Okay. Yeah.
So when did you know you wanted to be a business owner and do it your own?
No, dude. Real quick, touching on that though. After surviving the 08 downturn, the 14, and then now we're still surviving. Not saying we will, right? I mean, we're still here. Knock on wood. We definitely learned a lot from that, and we can circle over that later, like how to kind of run a little leaner, a little meaner, and not ramp up and scale up where we need. Only use the things we need, don't get too frivolous with spending, like you said, reinvest some money to kind of make things easier on the next go around, that kind of thing. Anyway, when did I learn that I wanted to be a business owner? I never thought in a million years I'd ever be a business owner. I, went to college, barely got out, Texas A&M, whoop, barely got out of there. And I was a surveyor right out of college for an infrastructure company in Dallas. They built all the dart rails, most of the dart rails out there. So that was really fun, man. I loved being outside, and it's kind of half and half. So we'd spend half the time out in the field surveying, track boundaries, angles, descriptions, all that kind of stuff. And that's actually where I learned like land, like how to deplot and all that fun stuff, and understood like conveyances and things. And so that's where I learned that. And then half the time was in the office, which I hated. I absolutely hated it. And so really, man, it was, I started hearing some buddies saying, oh man, I'm going to go be a landman in Fort Worth, out. And I was like, what the hell's a landman? Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, you just, figure out minerals and you talk to landowners and you spend some time in the courthouse and that's it. I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds easy. So an Aggie hired me, actually. Chris Kastner, first guy to hire me in the business. We're still good friends to this day. So hired on with his brokerage, and he was only a couple years older than us, so that was kind of a younger guy. He was an Aggie. That whole the old Aggie cult. How we're all we're drinking the Kool-Aid, right? I mean, we all are.
Oh yeah.
And so the day after I started, Judd, my now business partner, started, and so we kind of hit it off. He's an Aggie too, so we kind of hit it off and just became buds.
Y'all really do flock together, don't y'all?
Yeah, no, it's incestuous, man. It's kind of ridiculous. Blake's a good example. So we hit it off, and the 2008 downturn hit, and so again, Kastner's group had to scale back quite a bit. We survived, thankfully, and as things started scaling up, Judd and I, my partner and I, kind of became their right-hand guys, right? Like we were like the project managers. I was running a leasing team, and Judd was running title teams, and gosh, I mean, they got up to about 100 guys, and so several beers. So one night, several beers in, and we're talking to some other guys that had worked with the operator that we would work for. Judd and I kind of hatched a plan, like, hey, we could do this, right? Like, man, this is easy, right? Anybody can do this. We could just do it ourselves. Like, we just got to find, we just have to find a client, start a business, and do all these things. So at the end of 2009, we started Forza, still running under Chris's company, but he was really supportive of us. And I, to this day, I still appreciate how supportive of us he was with that. And so essentially, it was kind of like a mix of like preparation and luck. It's like when those two things meet, right? And so we got a call. So we had the company ready. We're essentially ready to go and kind of branch off on our own. So we got a call from East Texas, working with a big operator out there, and said, hey, you guys come out and interview, and they're ramping up, probably bring you on. It's like, all right, let's go, see what happens, right? It was a lot of, it's not like it wasn't like a very calculated, it wasn't just like, we're targeting all these things, because we had our full-time jobs we were doing, right? It wasn't, we had ideas to do things, but, by recollection, right, I don't recall it being super active. Like, these are the parties we need to reach out to, because it happened pretty quick once we started the company. And so they called us, we went and interviewed, which is a really interesting interview in hindsight. But they hired us, and they're like, well, we need 10 guys on the ground in like 2 weeks. Like, are you good? Can you do that? Like, oh, absolutely. No problem. I mean, I'm offended that you asked, dude.
And you're like, hey, Chubb, we need to find 10 dudes.
So Judd and I get in the truck, we head back to Fort Worth, and we're just looking at each other like, who in the hell are we going to hire? Like, who do we know? Like, what's going on? And so I had a couple of buddies from college, really smart guys that were landmen down in South Texas. Like, let's call them. We'll put an ad out basically on this website, and we got like I think in a couple of days we got 300 resumes or something pouring in. So we had to vet through all that, which was never fun. Hiring and firing is really awful. I'm not gonna lie. Like, firing obviously is terrible, but like just the process of hiring is such a pain in the ass, frankly. I mean, because you're vetting all these people, and have 3/4 of them are terrible when they come in, but you have to give them the time of day. And anyway, so we kind of cobbled a motley crew together out there in East Texas. So keep in mind, title work and land work in different parts of the state and different parts of the country are very different, right? Each of them have its own kind of unique challenges and different beasts, so to speak. A landman in South Texas, East Texas, North Texas, and West Texas it can be very, very different. It's just a different type of title. Anyway, I would argue that North Texas burnout title is pretty easy, right? You don't see a lot of mineral reservations. You don't see a lot of stuff transacting, at least not until 2008, 2009, 10, and now what it is, right? You see a lot of it now, but prior to that, you really didn't. So it was fairly easy to figure out who owned the minerals and to contact them, that kind of thing. East Texas is just god awful, man. It's the oldest part of the state, right? Spindletop's first part of the state the country essentially that it started, right? I mean, Spindletop is still producing, to this day. I read a factoid that Spindletop produced more in the first day than I think the 4 active wells in the Northeast in Pennsylvania or something were at the time than they've ever made in their entire life. This is like early 1900s, right?
Yeah.
So crazy. Anyway, oldest part of the state. Just a lot of old stuff going on, so you have to go back really far, and it gets real convoluted anyway. So we're diving in like head first into this stuff. And Judd had experience in East Texas, thankfully, so he knew his way around. But then there's also different formations and stuff that we were focusing on. There are 3 different formations, so we had never had to deal with that. We never had to deal with multiple zones. I mean, so again, talk about trial by fire. I mean, just diving in head first, and we assemble our crew, and we're trying to figure things out. And there was that first week or two, we're it's just he and I going to lunch together. And I was just like, man, I don't know. You think Chris would hire us back if we, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad, but there were a couple times we were just like, what, and so it just all kind of started coming together, and we surrounded ourselves with some really smart people, and, people that know a little bit more about us than specific things, and just kind of marrying all that together. And I mean, we could talk for hours about everything between then and now, and all that. But, I think it was initially it was the people that we chose and surrounded ourselves with. You'd have really hardworking guys that didn't really have a lot of experience, and that's perfect. That's great. Then you'd have some really experienced guys, that had been around a lot, but they kind of like to work autonomously. Fine, just help us out, help us piece all this together, and So what we've noticed, kind of rambling on here, but what we've noticed is like, your guys, kind of like we're talking about, you have to approach them in certain ways. Some guys you can be a little bit harder on, some guys you got to be a little easier on to kind of get to maximize their productivity and to keep them going. What we figured out is some guys are really good at some things and they're awful at other things, right? You have some guys that are fantastic title researchers, but you would never have them call a landowner or a mineral owner or a client or an operator, because they would, you would just think
they could piss off the devil.
Exactly. Yeah. But then you'd have other guys that can, car salesmen, right? They can sell anybody on anything.
Yeah.
But you would not want them ever like looking at a piece of title. Like you just say, here's where I need you to go.
They don't even know what an I is the dot.
No,
right?
no. And bless their hearts, because they're so good at it. They're so damn good at it. And just, putting those people in the positions that just make them the most productive. Like, we need you here. We need you here. Don't worry about anything else. Like, these are the things you focus on. That's not to say we don't have Renaissance men, right? We do have the guys that are good at everything. And those guys, you can't pay them enough to stay around to keep everything afloat. Because, when you figure out that they're actually a lot better at the craft than you are, you're like, okay, like, you need to stay. You could basically have whatever you want. Just, help us run this thing, and we'll take care of you as best we can, So, yeah, kind of rambling on there, but yeah.
Yeah, so let's go back to, 2009, y'all start Forza, right?
Yes, sir.
Naturally, 2014 happens.
Mm-hmm.
When in between those two dates before oil tank, did you look at Judd and go, dude, we're rocking it. Like, we've made it. What year would you say that was?
I don't know if there was ever a we've made it type thing.
We're going to be just fine.
I think there was we felt comfortable, I guess, because with the operator and the client we were working for and the group we were working with was a really, really good group. This client could do no wrong. I mean, these guys were, they're still rocking and rolling like better than anybody else out there. I mean, they're fantastic. We definitely hitched our wagons to the right group right out the get-go, right? Versus some mom and pop shop or some, Chesapeake or somebody that failed, So we were very fortunate to be hooked up with them. Now, I will say, we kind of had blinders on though during that phase, because we were so busy with everything going on. I mean, we're just like rocking and rolling as best we can, trying to keep everything afloat and keep everybody happy, and keep in front of the rigs as best we could. But with that, we didn't really pick our heads up too much. That there was a wider world of oil and gas out there, not just this one client, because they're fantastic. It's like, why would you need to go anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
You've got the prom queen, right? Why do you need to go anywhere else? And that's kind of how they ran it too. They didn't really want us lifting our heads up too much and exploring other options and other people to work for. And, like we all know, you can't just have one client, right? You can't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
You got to have several. And that's, if that hurts their feelings or offends anybody, sorry, but you can't guarantee me work forever, and you can't guarantee that I'm gonna keep the lights on and all my guys busy forever. They just can't, that's the industry, that's oil and gas, and you can't guarantee anything. But so I will say we kind of had blinders on then, because we were so busy, B, they kind of kept it that way, and it wasn't until a couple of projects kicked off where I went and ran a project down in College Station. It was actually on Madison County. So, there I am in 12, I think is when we started it. So I'm back at my alma mater. I'm back in College Station. I'm like kid in a candy store, but I've got a lot more responsibility because I'm kind of on my own running this group versus when Judd and I were together running things, So he's got his whole huge project he's running. I've got my project I'm running. But I'm also back in College Station. So I'm just like, gig 'em, going crazy. And the Aggies had just joined the SEC. We had Johnny Football, that whole hype and mania and all that fun stuff. So, that was a great time, man. there, rocking and rolling, had a great crew. Cost of living is super cheap there and everything else. And I was closer to Austin where my parents live. It was easier to get to Houston, easier to get to Dallas, all that fun stuff. So there I was able to kind of pick up my head a little bit and see that there was a wide world of other oil and gas opportunities outside of just this one client we were working for. And a lot of that had to do with like spending some time in Houston, because a lot of big oil and gas hub, right? And so I was spending a lot of time down there, weekends and things like that, and different industry events. And, so I kind of got the idea. I was like, man, we need to expand out a little bit. We've been working for these guys for so long. We really need to look at some other people. And so that was good. And actually started with Blake Harris, started a YPE chapter, Young Professionals in Energy, there in College Station. I'm no longer a part of that because I'm no longer young and I'm barely a professional. So I don't really know why they let me do that. But Blake was huge in helping me do that. And started that there and started to get introduced to more people, not just in my discipline either, not just landmen. What I really liked was being able to surround ourselves with engineers and geologists and attorneys and finance guys and things like that, because I think one of the most important things about being a landman is you kind of have to know a little about a lot when you're talking to people out there, out in the big wide world, so that you can speak to all of those things. Sure, you can talk about the land and the title and all that stuff, but you need to be able to convey how an oil and gas rig works. How long is it going to be there? What about fracking? What about directional drilling? How is it going to talk? Is everybody going to die when we drink the water later? Like, no, none of that's going to happen. So you have to know a little bit. So I loved being surrounded by, and so we did some joint events with the AADs, the drilling engineers, the SPEs, which is the Society of Petroleum Engineers, with A&M. So we had like students there, and then we had like younger professionals working, and kind of married all that together. And that was huge for me to listen to some of these like young engineers, kind of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, explain to me how geology works and drilling rigs work, because I didn't know anything about that. I'm like, explain to me how all this works, because it's a science. It's a little bit different than the land side. So that's where I kind of started seeing the big wide world that hey, there's a lot of other things out here. So yeah, I'll let you jump in. I'm just kind of rambling here.
No, that's great. So you're going, you're blowing and going. 2014 happens. Yeah. Then when do you start to see it after 2014 tick up again?
So downturn hit. We closed that office at College Station. We reconsolidated everything in East Texas, and our East Texas office, we were working out of literally a storage unit, like a warehouse, like this little storage unit in Bullard, I think is the address. And literally, you open the garage, and we had built out a little, couple little workstations for the guys, and then I was kind of like what's the word? Squatting at a buddy's office here in Fort Worth, an attorney's buddy. I was paying him, a few $100 or whatever, just to like occupy a corner of an office kind of thing, and to kind of keep everything going. And got back here, and I guess your question was when did
you start to
see the uptick?
Mm-hmm.
After 14 or 14, 15. Man, it was a couple of months into the next year. And kind of like what I was saying was I had kind of built a little bit of a network out there, guys in Houston, guys in Dallas, guys in Fort Worth, and I'm starting to get plugged in Fort Worth. And Fort Worth is such a great town that's very open, and nobody's really a stranger here, right? Mm-hmm. Like they'll talk to you, they'll listen to you. It's a good old boy system to an extent, not as bad as like Midland or East Texas or some of these other areas. Like Midland's like, if you're not from there, if you're not fourth generation oil and gas, if you didn't go to Texas Tech, if you didn't go to Permian High, it's if you don't live there, it's a hard bubble to break into, and it just is. And I get it. That's fine. That just is what it is. Fort Worth is different though. That people will talk to you, people will listen to you, and see what you're about, and see what see what you're doing and what you want to do, and connect you. That the biggest thing was how eager people were to connect. Like, here's what I do, here's what we're doing. We've worked for these guys in the past. Like, oh, you got to meet so-and-so. Like, he'll be able to connect you with so-and-so. Oh, you got to talk to so-and-so. They're a great guy. I mean, they know everybody kind of thing. And so like that warm welcome was huge, when I got back here. And so really, man, it was getting plugged in and kind of getting networked out to some people, and kind of leveraging those relationships. Like, hey, I'm here. Like, we're back. Like, we're ready to rock and roll. Like, what can we do for you? without being overly aggressive. Obviously, that there's a little tact there. You don't just kick down the door and say, hey, hire me, kind of thing. But hey, we're around. This is what we do. This is who we've worked for in the past. I mean, you know what I do, and there's 100 other guys like me out there, but I think I do it a little better than everybody else. Of course, everybody's going to say that. So it was early to mid 15 that things started kicking up, and that was when it wasn't one big client with like 100 guys running. It was several clients with little projects here and there, and that's kind of how it is now. Those big, large scale projects really aren't around right now. So it's a lot of little guys, little projects that we work on for various clients and things, all different scales, from big dogs to small family offices. Law firms are great because there's a lot of due diligence going on with all the buying and selling going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, you get in there and vet everything and just make sure that everything they're buying is actually what they're buying, kind of thing. And so there's a ton of that going on. And so we've tried to do as much of that as we can, just to keep guys busy, man. So, yeah.
So what year out of all the years would you say was the best year for your company?
18.
18? Okay.
So, hang on. 19.
19. So
because we're 2021, right? So 2020 was terrible. So 19
so,
was great. It really was, man.
So tell me about 19.
It was just kind of all those things coming together. Oil's riding high, gas is riding high, everything's good. Like I said, we're primarily focused East Texas, Louisiana, so gas heavy. But man, just random phone calls like, hey, I need you to do this. Or, hey, I got your name from so-and-so. Can you do this? Hey, I need you to look into this. It's like all those relationships kind of all came together, and they had heard of us, from somebody that knew somebody that said somebody or what have you. We also got into renewables. We also got into land acquisition for wind farms and solar farms up in the Midwest. So we just finished a project up there. It was about 4 years long. I mean, it was a big one. It was just a couple of guys working. It was a large scale, but the manpower was pretty small. So that was really cool to get into something a little bit different than just oil and gas, right? And the way things are going, renewable energy is going to be a bigger piece of the pie moving forward, right? Oil and gas isn't going away like we've talked about. Nuclear energy is obviously still there, but so it was really good to get involved in that. And we've done a lot of solar projects in Texas as a result of that, just having that experience in the Midwest. So interestingly enough, the way we landed the Midwest job was a guy that worked for us down in College Station has become a good friend of mine, and we've kind of kept up over the years. And he had been a renewable developer prior to that, and he went and hooked up with this company, a big Spanish company, operates in North America. And we keep up pretty well, probably talk about once a week. And he just called me and said, man, I've got this broker here and they suck. I don't know how else to say it. They're terrible. And we got to replace them ASAP. He's like, you're gonna have to bid on it because it's a Spanish company. So you have to bid on these things. And he's like, but you should have a shoe in. We should make this work because I've worked directly for you. I know exactly how you guys operate. You guys rock. He's like, just please come help me.
Yeah.
And that was it. And a lot of that had to do again with like maintaining that relationship with some of these guys that we've tried to treat as well as we could over the years and keep them happy and keep food on their table. And again, talk about a phone call out of nowhere. We had a phone call from an operator in East Texas, recommended by a law firm here in town, Harris Finley Bogle. Shout out to my boys over there. They're awesome. Called me out of the blue, said, hey, I got your name from HFB, said you guys do good work. Like, can you guys ever worked Louisiana before? Like, yeah, we had not near to the scale that we do now. And you don't ever want to say no to a client if you can't, but if you don't have to. And so out of the blue, called us up, went to Shreveport, talked to him, had a great lunch, and we've been working for him ever since. And so it's again, all because I met these guys and hit it off with them, and we do work for them too. And so I think that was kind of the tipping point. So 19 was probably saw all that to its like max that really Forza's ever had. So then you had COVID, and all those things kind of went away. So
before we jump into COVID,
yeah.
What would you say your biggest challenge was when the getting was good in 2019 that you were losing sleep over?
Oh yeah, keeping guys busy, making sure everybody had something to do, and just keeping clients happy. So when you have, clients are kind of funny. They want to know that you're focused 100% on their project, and I totally get that, right? I mean, there's 100 other guys like me out there they could be using. And so we just got to keep up with that and just make sure, hey, these guys are getting taken care of, update them constantly. Pick up the phone when they call. If you miss the call them right back. The biggest challenge was probably, just balancing between all the different groups that we were working for, and just reassuring them that, like, hey, we have this crew totally committed to you guys. We have this crew totally committed to your project. Appointing kind of leads, project managers, project leads, to be the point of contact, kind of alleviate Judd and I's involvement with every little thing. Now we're copied on everything, right? Every little email, every hundreds and hundreds of emails a day, because you have to be, right. If you'll see something go, and you're like, oh, I got to get in front of that, because you just don't want it to go down a path that, because you've seen it before, right? You've seen, all right, my guy said this, but I know the client's questions are going to be X, Y, and Z, right? So you're like, all right, I can get in front of that. And so you just have to you're just constantly on your phone, weeknights, weekends. And again, not that there's no fires burning necessarily. It's just keeping up and making sure everything is like spinning the right way that it's supposed to be going. That was probably the biggest challenge.
That's a good point that you bring up, is like weekends and nights and everything else. Is I don't think that a lot of people that are not business owners understand the level of, you're never off.
Never.
Right?
I mean, you don't work. One of my landmen said, we don't work normal hours, but we work all hours. That's a good way to put it, right? I mean, we're typically not 8 to 5. I mean, we'll, if we need to run to the courthouse, we need to go visit a landowner, you're going to be out for a couple hours or whatever, right? But we're always available, always answer your phone, always respond to emails, Saturdays, Sundays, weekends, that's the same thing, but nights, all that stuff. Just being available is huge. Couldn't agree more on that. That's what keeps you up, is just constantly having to stay on that and just glued to your phone. And I'm sure your wife, my wife loves it. Just loves the fact that I'm just like constantly on my phone. And I'm better about it now, right? I'm better about, okay, put it down 6 o'clock. It can wait till the morning. Later in the evening, I'll put it up. I can respond to a couple. Get up early, handle it, before the kind of the day starts or whatever. It's always on your mind, right? I mean, when you've got all these guys that rely on you, they rely on my partner and I to keep things going. I mean, that's what keeps you up. It's really, you said it earlier, I think before we started the podcast, you are really kind of the last thing you're thinking about. Like, you just want to make sure that poor Eddie over here, or Justin, or, Jessica, whoever, they all have something to do to keep food on the table, especially right now. We had a guy, I won't say his name because we work for him. Work for him now. He was our first hire with Forza, and then he went on to do bigger and better things, and we work for him now. Great relationship, right? One of our closest friends, and personally and professionally. And I remember one time we were cutting checks, and we were still handwriting checks back then, or Judd was, and we ran out of checks, and so we're like, okay, well, we won't cut our own checks. We'll cut it for everybody else. And then it just so happened that we were -1 for this guy, right? And he's a smart ass anyway. So it just kind of worked out. So of course, right, he comes in, he's like, oh, I'm here to get my checks. Like, oh man, sorry, we ran out of checks or whatever. And he smarts off. He's like, oh, I'm sure you guys cut your check though, huh? Like, and he was kind of being tongue in cheek, kind of being funny. And man, we were just like, well, listen up. Like we actually hadn't even cut our own checks, and we ordered checks, and it'll be a little while, but don't worry, we'll go get a temporary check for you from the bank. And he's like, all right, well, sorry about that. And, we were just kind of messing with him a little bit. But, but you have to, man. Because case in point, like if your guys figure out, if, the perception is that you're lining your own pockets and you're not worried about any of these guys, which you are, it looks horrible. It's terrible. Yeah. Morale and all, that's a bad way to run things. So anyway.
Yeah. And I think that's the frustration that I get in this country is, and this is not meant to be a political statement. It'll sound like a political statement, but it's not. It's actually, most people don't even know where I lie on the spectrum. They don't know if I'm left, right, center, whatever, right? Crazy, Green Party, Libertarian, whatever, right? But you have all these people going, give me mine, right? And I'm like, okay, you want me because, I've received the benefit of a lot of this, to just hand this over, but you're one element. See, you as an employee have shown up every day and only had to worry about yourself.
Right.
I've had to worry about every single person. And the one thing I can promise you is every one of my employees got paid before I did.
Yeah.
And so now, because I've taken that risk and I've taken that pain and I've lost that sleep and I'm answering my phone at night, on weekends, on holidays, on vacation, on a laptop, when I'm in Europe with my daughter and all this, and then now you're entitled to more.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I'm sitting there going, why are you entitled to more? Now, I am willing to pay based on performance. Right. And I'm not saying any one of my current employees have done this. I'm just trying
Sure.
to encapsulate the entire mentality of owning a business with you get all this, well, I should get more, or you should do this and all that. And I'm sitting there going, you're not the one with sleepless nights. So you want to get more of a bigger piece of the pie.
Yeah.
But you don't want to lose your sleep.
Right.
You want to be able to go to the ball games with little Johnny. You want to be able to go on vacations and not be
And
interrupted.
turn your phone off. Yeah.
You want to take some of that PTO and go do all this. What you don't want to do is lose all the sleep, but you want to be entitled.
Yeah.
And I'm really getting annoyed in this country hearing how more people think that they should be entitled to something when I'm sitting there going, wait a minute. When you're willing to lose sleep like I have,
Yeah.
then I'll be willing to have that conversation with you, right? Because right now, you're not. As a matter of fact, I had a guest on before, and I said, look, people fall into one of three categories. Either they don't want to be a business owner at all, right? They're like, whoop, nope, don't even want to. I want to do my 40 and go home.
Yeah.
Good. And we need those folks.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then you have the people that are employees that are, falling in one of two categories. The category of entrepreneur spirit and entrepreneur courage. And what I mean by that is you have a lot of people that either may be capable of owning and running their own business, but they just don't have the desire to go do it.
Sure.
Or you have people that have the desire to go do it, but they really don't have the capability to go do it. Or they have neither desire or the capability.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the entrepreneur courage, which is, do you know how much sleep I've lost? Do you know how much money I have reinvested? How many hours I have poured in? And then now you just want to show up, or the government, whoever's running for whatever office, go, oh, well, you should just give more away. Like, what did you do? Especially career politicians, right?
Yeah.
You have to have politicians, I get that. But when I hear a career politician after 4 decades in business going, well, this is what you should do. Like, whoa.
Yeah.
You've had the security of a check.
You haven't had a real job, really.
You've had the security of a check, but I've lost all this sleep. And you, because you have the security of a check, should determine what I'm going to go do with my money?
Yeah.
Like, come on, seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, I should give more? And then I think back to guys like you and I, how much, like I said earlier on this episode, how charitable we have been, right? I give to tons of charities, right? I've been very, very generous. And that's why I get really annoyed when somebody says, oh, you know what you should do? And I'm like, well, what you should go do is go do what I've done and then come back and have that same conversation, because what you have is a different perspective, because you've never had to hold the bag, either when it's money or when it's the debt, whether it's the assets or the liabilities. But you feel like you can show up and just tell me, this is what you should go do. And of course, I can think of very flavorful 4-letter words and tell them what they should go do, right?
Sure.
And so now we get through all this, like the experience of like going, hey, where were you when you were getting the security of your check that I had to look at over 100 people and say, I'm sorry, I gotta lay you off because this is what happened. I had no control over it, and now I'm gonna go lose sleep.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be the one that's gonna continue the stress of all this until I can bring these people back and try to put them back to work, right? So with that being said, and that's as far as I'll go down that tangent, because I could really just do an entire
we could talk for
series on that.
We could talk for hours about it.
So you've done all this, the getting's good, then COVID hits.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so this is really a 2-part question. Is COVID hits where no one really expected the whole world to shut down. So I want to know, what was it like for you and your company now experiencing yet another major catastrophe in the market? And with that being said, did your experience from 2014 help prepare you for whatever actions you may or may not have taken after the pandemic hit?
Yeah, obviously came as a shock, to everybody. I mean, there was COVID, right? But then there was the Russian-Saudi price war. It's something that kind of gets glossed over these days. That again, you read these articles and you're like, oh, it's because people aren't driving and flying, which is a huge part of it. But it was also the price war between these guys that got started. And there's depending on what rabbit hole you want to go down, it's sometimes very suspect that, oh, hey, we have this world pandemic that everybody's getting shut down, and then all of a sudden Russians and the Saudis want to have a
Coincidental,
price war, and never let a good crisis go to waste, kind of thing. And so then you saw the -40 oil one day, and everybody's like, okay, well this is the apocalypse, right? Everybody, and it was just the market had rebound the next day, and it was I forget what it got to. It was extremely low, obviously. So yeah, I mean, going through a couple of downturns, we try to run as lean and mean as possible. We've had clients that just shove it down our throats, like, you have to hire more guys, which is great. It's more money in our pocket, but it just becomes a pain to manage and keep all those going, hiring and firing and all that kind of stuff. And this one in particular was like, basically, if you don't hire 25 people right now, we're going to find somebody else to do it, kind of thing. And I'm just like, how are we going to scale up 25 people? That's such a burden on us just to bring people in. And half these guys didn't know what they were doing, but that's what the client wanted. So you're just like, okay. So now we're much more aware and cognizant of that. So if client's like, hey, we probably need like 5 more guys. And it's like, we probably need like 2.
Yeah.
Realistically, to get these things done. I've got a really good guy over here. He can take care of X, Y, and Z. And so we're just a lot better about keeping it as lean as possible. And that affects the bottom line, right? I mean, also for the clients and everybody else, is like that's their money too. Mm-hmm. So we can get it done cheaper and for the same amount of time or faster, then that makes us look way better, right? And so March, April, I guess, is when all this stuff started going down. I don't remember the numbers we were at. I think we were at about 60 guys, 50, 60, scaled down to like 15, and then I think we're back to like 20 now. So not terrible. There's other groups out there that aren't faring as well that aren't even around. So anymore.
Percentage-wise, you didn't have to lay off as many percentage-wise this round as you had to in 2014.
Right, but I think most of that was a product of not having a lot of fat to trim. Right, like we didn't have a lot of just guys. Right, we had the right guys in place for those projects, and there wasn't any extra admin or gophers or anything like that. We just know better now. We just don't need those things. And
experience is a wonderful thing. Isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely helps. So again, it's unfortunate. There's a handful of guys that we had to let go, and we've brought them back on temporary deals. I've connected them with other groups, as best I can. Like, hey, call so and so. I've connected them with groups. They have gotten jobs there, so I'm really thankful of that. And that so. So that hit. I mean, not a whole lot as far as like the day-to-day changed, other than there just wasn't a whole lot going on. There were still projects and things we're doing. A lot of these companies have the prices hedged out for the year, and then for this year, 2021. So those are still going, but other groups, were not hedged and they're not healthy, and so and I should make a point too that like our own of the clients we had, they're not all operators, right? Some are small mom and pop mineral companies, law firms, mineral buyers, things like that. So it's a different type of work in a different capacity. It's not just traditional land work. There's other things that we do for them, but mostly for operators though. So yeah, I mean, as far as the day to day, nothing really changed other than everything was scaled back quite a bit, and getting out and networking and kind of developing business as best I can was like cranked up to 11, and so I've kind of tried to focus on that as much as I could for the past however many months. Again, the same thing, right? You're not breathing down anybody's neck. You're not being super aggressive with everything, but you just kind of gently remind everybody out there in the world that like, hey, we're around, we're still working. I'd love to work for you. You know what we do. I know what you do. Would love to do that for you, and I think we do a good job, and I think we do it better than some of these other guys. And so yeah, just kind of staying relevant and having a presence has been kind of my goal over the past several months. And again, just remind everybody, hey, we're still here and still rocking and rolling. Because like I said, some groups aren't around anymore. Some big groups, like big names, like on the broker side, that just aren't around anymore.
I mean, they're like gone, not like temporarily gone, like gone.
Yeah. And which would shock you. And these are like Fort Worth household names that everybody knows. And so
So what would you contribute to being? Here it is, you got powerhouses that are closed forever and you're still chugging along. What would you say is the key ingredient that you have that allows you to still keep chugging along when other household names are gone forever?
Probably scale. a lot of those groups are pretty big, and so they had a lot of guys working them. I know, some of their rates could be probably a little higher than ours and things like that. I guess it doesn't really surprise me with some of those bigger groups because they're working for the bigger operators, right? And the bigger operators are the ones that were probably hit the hardest. They're not drilling any rigs. They're not drilling anything right now. Rigs are slow, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's mainly just kind of the groups that we've aligned ourselves with. The kind of slow and steady, like slow and steady wins the race kind of thing. Now, don't get me wrong. If EOG called me tomorrow and was like, "Hey, I need 50 guys on the ground," I'd be like, "Yes, sir," right away. Like we're going for it. Those are the calls you're like, seeing dollar signs. But just aligning ourselves with certain people that could kind of keep us busy in groups and that have stuff to do, that have just bought assets or assessed assets. Again, law firms are really good relationships. I love attorneys because they're kind of in the same boat that we are, especially oil and gas attorneys, right? Their client base is the same exact as ours, right? We just do a different kind of side, like it's essentially the same work, but just kind of a different level, right? Mm-hmm. And so we can work in tandem a lot on stuff. And that's what I really like about HFB is that we've got a really good relationship with those guys. And we're all, kind of hunting for the same people and working for the same groups too. So it works out really well. It's like, hey, these attorneys do a great job. Hey, Forza does a really great job. Works out really well, right?
So that's a good point. Let's say I'm HFG 2.0 and I'm looking around for companies like yours to come do some work for me, and I hear Jared Clark at Forza. Why would I hire you? Like if you had to sit there and you had a 30-second, you get the 30-second elevator speech to go, why do I hire you? Why do I hire you?
Just pedigree. Been around a long time. We've survived 3 downturns. We've worked all over the freaking country in some kind of unique spots, right? South Texas, West Texas, East Texas. East Texas is very hard. I think most landmen will agree. Like it's a hard area to work. Louisiana is a totally different law. It's the Napoleonic law, right? It's completely different on the oil and gas side. Utah, Oklahoma, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Illinois, Kentucky, Washington, all over the damn place, right? So not only that, but like I said before, not just traditional operators, but mom and pop shops, small mineral buyers, law firms. We were talking to Baylor the other day about mapping all of their oil and gas assets across the country. I mean, it's different capacities that we've worked in that I feel have excelled at. That would probably be it. Is the pedigree, our experiences. We try to keep as lean as possible or keep our rates low. Like I said, slow and steady. We don't hit you with a massive bill at the end of this stuff. Hopefully haven't made too many mistakes along the way. Everybody makes mistakes, but it does happen. And just being able to own up to those, when they do happen. Hey, this is what happened. Here's why it happened. It's not going to happen again. Let's move on. If you guys are good to move on, right? Never ever try to sweep anything under the rug, right? That will bite you in the ass so fast.
Yeah.
And I think that transparency is super, super important with these guys, So
it's funny you say that. It just stimulated a thought in my head is in the Marine Corps when you're going through boot camp, right? And you're always cleaning, you're always servicing, you're always doing something. Uh-huh. And we had these blankets that were on everybody's cots that you'd make the blankets, but they always caused the little furry things to fall off that the drill instructors called ghost turds, right? And they were like, get all the ghost turds because trust me, we're going to know when you don't, because even if I might not see it today, a breeze is going to come through. That ghost turd's going to present itself, and I'm going to know that you didn't get everything, right? Yeah. So it's really, really interesting to say. So would it be a fair statement to say is some of the key ingredients to your success is being smaller, agile, and the diversification of what you can do allows you to deliver the value for somebody that comes looking for your services?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like I said, if some big dog operator comes along and says, "Hey, we need so many people on the ground, get it going," mm-hmm. Yes, sir, right away. I mean, that's not even not gonna hesitate, right? But right. Yeah, I mean, I really do. Like I said, man, our office in Tyler was again, we're trying to keep our overhead so low, right? And so we were literally out of a freaking warehouse, and it's literally what we called it the warehouse office, and kind of tongue in cheek a little bit. And, but it's what we had to do, man. It's what we had to do to keep guys around. And we wanted guys to come to the office, right? We wanted guys. We needed that cohesion. We needed everybody working together. We don't, we encourage guys to come to the office. They don't have to all the time. They're all contractors, right? Yeah. But they're not just out lone wolfing it, at the courthouse or sitting at their own house, watching Oprah while they're working. Mm-hmm. That doesn't fly. So we highly and strongly encourage them to come to the office, and and all that. Now, that is not to say we don't have remote guys working, because we do, and that's what's cool too, is kind of our network of landmen. They're all over the state, which is what's really nice. We got West Texas, like Austin area, South Texas. So when people do call, like, hey, I need something down here, I need a project started here, it's like, oh, I've got a guy in Houston that can hit the courthouse right now. They can kind of run it, be the point man or point girl for it. We have some guys in Louisiana, we have Colorado. Some of those are on like a part-time basis, but we can just pick up the phone and get started ASAP, which is nice. So, I think we learned to just not scale up. Again, you see dollar signs and you're like, man, okay, we could have 100 guys working for us and this would be good to go. But it's a lot of headache, and I'd rather, like I said, go home and leave work 5, 6, whatever it is, and not have to worry about looking at my phone every damn minute to keep everything going. So yeah.
Well, let's talk about home for a second. This is a good transition point. I have so much respect for you and admiration for you on so many different levels. So the audience has got to hear for the last hour or so the insane amount of hours that you put in, still continue to put in, the insane amount of sacrifices you made through 3 downturns, and just all this that just with that alone, with nothing else involved in your life, is taxing enough for probably even a high performer to be like, oh my God, that I don't think I can drink an ounce of anything else. You don't have that luxury. You got married, right? And you got 2 kiddos now, right? You didn't have a third during the pandemic that I didn't know about, right? So you had 2 kiddos, right? You had 2 kiddos. So here it is, you're doing all this, you're making all these sacrifices, and most people, when they do get a chance to finally go home and disconnect, you go home and you got your plate full again, don't you?
Yeah, sure do, man. 2 girls, which in and of itself is, I will say with girls, my partner has 2 girls too. And he said this to me a while ago. He's like, I always wanted a boy, throw the football around, all that fun stuff. He's like, but honestly, man, I wouldn't trade anything for these 2 girls. And I'm like, man, I kind of agree with him. Like, boys are kind of a handful, honestly. Yeah. I understand girls become a handful as they get older.
But I'm with y'all, by the way.
Yeah.
Is you're king of the kingdom. Yeah. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And the boys are going to admire you. Girls are going to love you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you feel that love. You see it when they look at you, and you just go, you know what? Yeah. So I feel, man, I love that analogy. Yeah. So let's tell the audience about the full-time job you get to go to when you go home.
So Anna, first daughter, so she was born with OI, it's osteogenesis imperfecta, essentially brittle bones, like weak bones. Several different classifications of it. It used to be type 1 through 3. Now there's like 16 different types. So it's really more specific to the person, to the individual. So, like I said, so she has weak bones, and she's pretty petite for her age. She's 3 now. She's 3 now. So she's talking and all that fun stuff. So we learned, that she had this, affliction, I guess, in the womb. So we were made aware of it and kind of prepare for it a little bit. And so it actually caused some bowing in her bones. Here in March, actually, we're going to get some titanium rods put in her femurs, and eventually the lower leg, and then eventually the arms and things. But so her mobility is pretty limited, right? I mean, she really can't get around on her own. She kind of sort of crawl, but there's that threshold we're not fully, we haven't fully explored, because, once they kind of go to, you don't want them to break anything, right? I mean, just not to get too much into it. I mean, she has a microfracture in her femur, like literally just the other day. Like her leg got caught in her wheelchair spokes, and I'm kind of making light of it. I'm trying not to get too serious about it or whatever. But obviously extremely taxing and uncharted territory. First kid, didn't know what that kids already are difficult. You have no idea what you're doing in the first one. You're just like, oh, I'm having a kid, and then you put that on top of it. Definitely very challenging. So keeping like positive and keeping kind of looking to the future is important. I try to look at the good in everything, right? There's always, the grass is always greener, but also the grass is always frankly shittier sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, just to be real honest. I mean, yeah, you think you got it bad, but some people have it way worse and are not as fortunate as you are. So try to be, very positive. So cognitively, she's 100%. She's super smart, just like her mom. My wife is way smarter than I am. It's ridiculous how much smarter she is. she's a pharmacist, and just I don't even know why she married me, honestly. So cognitively, Anna is 100%. She's awesome. She talks and all that fun stuff, but just physically challenged. And so she has a wheelchair we help her get into, and we're hoping with putting the rods in, which is an 8-hour surgery. It's not easy, right? I mean, each leg is 4 hours, I think. Surgery is surgery, right? Regardless of what it is, that's going in. And she has a central line because she takes a medicine called Pamidronate. They developed it in the 80s, supposed to essentially reinforce the bones. Long and short of it is, so she has an absorption issue is what it is. So how like every 6 years, every cell in your body is different from what it was before, whatever. Essentially, your bones are doing the same thing, right? So there's calcium, which makes up your bones. So drink your milk, right? It increases your calcium. And collagen. And so the way it was explained to me was collagen. So calcium is like the concrete, and collagen is the rebar to the calcium. So it's actually an absorption issue. So it doesn't reabsorb like you and I do. And so what the Pamidronate does, it helps that process, and it helps to technically reinforce the bones. So she started taking that when she was little. She got a central line put in, which is a lot like cancer patients have central lines that go directly, into their I guess jugular. And so, right out of the womb, she's having surgery to get that put in, and she was born with multiple fractures. I don't even think they counted how many, because it was like everything was broken, essentially. Not everything, but clavicle, all the long bones, several ribs, a couple of the vertebrae. So there was that right out the womb, and so we spent, I think, 3 to 4 weeks. My wife would be mad. I'm probably butchering all this. 3 to 4 weeks in the NICU at Cook's. Cook's is fantastic, by the way. They've been a huge supporter of us. And oddly enough, coincidentally enough, we had gotten involved with Cook's prior to that because our neighbors worked there, and we've been kind of involved in that. So what a strange coincidence, right? Fate, if you will, that we happened to have to spend a lot of time at Cook's, and we already knew a lot of people that worked over there and on the foundation side and all that. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So, so she is, going to be, physically challenged the rest of her life. There's no cure for this thing. It's a genetic mutation. It doesn't, you don't fix it or anything like that. So I'm pretty particular or careful with my wording. I don't want to say like different or anything. She's just not typical, right? Probably the biggest challenge for me, because I'm such a social guy, I just love getting out there, and I think it's important for kids to be socialized and everything else. And she does socialize. She's got cousins and family and all that fun stuff, and kids in the neighborhood and things like that. It's just going to be different for her growing up. It's going to be a lot different. She's going to physically but also social situations will be different, just because they are different from me, and that's just frankly human nature. If you're just not exactly like me, it's just, it's how it is. It's just, anyway, so that'll probably be the biggest challenge for her, and that I will probably struggle with the most as she gets older, again, because I just love people. I love being around people, and I want her to kind of experience those things too, and it'll be harder for her, so yeah, I kind of went on there. I don't know if you have any questions or anything.
That's great. So let me ask you a question.
Yep.
And this might be a very sensitive, and it's a landmine. If it is, you could say, nope, not touching that today. And that's okay too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we live in a world today where it seems like dialogue doesn't occur like you and I sitting here right now,
mm-hmm.
right? People are more opinionated, putting things out instead of having conversations, or being ignorant, not learning more about a topic or a person or something like that, right?
Sure.
And we live in a world where it seems like cruelty is much worse than what it was maybe when you and I were your daughter's age.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever have like thoughts or feelings of like, at some point, someone's going to be an asshole?
Yeah.
And I mean, does that run through your head at all? Like how she's going to react to it, and how can you prepare her for that?
Yeah, I think at a younger age, when she's, that's actually really tough. When she's kind of able to cognitively understand it, just kind of have a very real and straightforward conversation with her. Like, not to get too worked up here, like, you are different than everybody else, and that's a fact. Like, that's what it is, and that's okay. Yeah. It's okay to be different. but you just need to understand that you are, and that's just the hand you were dealt, and that's fine. It's a challenge. We'll figure it out. Thankfully, we have the means, to take care of her, and loving parents and loving family, and big wide family, and as she gets older, she's going to have whatever the hell she wants, right? I mean, she's going to go to college. She's going to do all those things. We met a person that has OI. She's 35 now. She works for NASA. She's married. Went to A&M. Great example of like what you can do with this. And there's more severe cases of it too. Like Anna's only had I think she's had like 8 to 10 breaks since the womb, or since coming out. There's some kids that have 60 breaks a year, 100 breaks a year. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine? So you really put it in perspective that like, this is hard and this sucks. But it's not the end of the world, right? I mean, she's a strong girl. She's super smart. She does all her things. She has all the means to do these things. She's got her little wheelchair, and the goal is that she'll be like maybe in like a walker, maybe walk on her own someday, with a cane or something, right? I'm not just like giving up, on that. And I think that was probably the hard part with going through the hospital and everything else. There was a lot of sympathy, which is fine, I've never been one for like sympathy or like hand. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry this has happened to you. I'm like, well, don't be sorry. Like help me.
Yeah.
Like I don't need and not that I'm not grateful for, but like I don't need your sympathy. Like I just need you to help me. Like help us do this thing. Like treat her like any other kid, because she is like any other kid, right? That was. So I'm saying all that, and that her case is not mild. It's kind of middle of the road for OI, because some OI patients are like you and I, and you don't even know that you have it unless you you or I'll step off a curb and we'll twist our ankle, but an OI patient would like break their ankle, right? Very, very mild cases of it, but there's very severe cases like I talked about. And so it really puts it in perspective that and I don't want to, how do I say this? I don't want to take away from anybody else's burdens, especially with their kids, but there are kids with cancer out there. There are kids with afflictions and things that are very severe, very debilitating. And I almost hate to say this, but we don't have those issues. We don't have those very serious issues. We go to the infusion center every 6 weeks, I think, to get the permethrin. It's crazy. It's a 4-hour infusion. It's actually really small doses, but they shit ton of saline in there, and it goes over 4 hours. So imagine keeping like a 3-year-old still for for 4 hours, and it's a lot of iPhone and games and everything else. And so we go to the infusion center at Cook's, and dude, you're surrounded by cancer patients and all these other things, and you again, like I said, the grass is always greener, but also it could be worse. And again, I don't want to detract from anybody else's issues that they have, but we're not in those shoes, thankfully, and we can move forward, and she can have a very productive and healthy life. And just trying to give her all those things and go to college, and and she has a sister now. So that'll be huge, like having a sibling and cousins and everything. And I'm kind of, there was a whole lot over 3 years, right? That very, very bad and dark and all that kind of stuff. And, going to the other room to kind of let out some emotions, and coming back and keeping everybody level-headed with everything, and vice versa. I'm always really good about that kind of stuff. And her being in medicine too has tremendously helped. She's a pharmacist, and so has helped tremendously. We'll go to these doctor's visits, and they're just like sitting there saying all this stuff, and I'm like, I'm just a landman. I'm an idiot. I don't know. Like, y'all are way smarter than I am, but I'm just like, sure, sounds great, doc. Like, I don't know what the hell they're saying. And so having her have that background I think has been like, I think me kind of being very positive, like the eternal optimist, then having her very grounded knowledge of medical field and how all this stuff works has been huge, to kind of get through everything. So yeah, man, I don't see it. I really don't see it as much of a burden. The biggest thing, and I tell the guys that work this all the time, is like, I don't ever want what I have to do with her to like influence too much. Like, I don't want it to get in the way of work, right? So I try to keep it to myself. I try to keep, like, even if I'm at the hospital or we're dealing with a broken leg or whatever, like, I try not to let that get into the work stuff. Like, I try not to let that be an excuse. Like, hey man, I'm sorry, I got to call you back. I'm dealing with my daughter or whatever. Right. I try to just be like, give me like 5-10 minutes or give me a half hour. I'll call you back. I promise. Yeah. We'll address that. I'll hit that email, because, everybody has their own other stuff they're doing. They've got their own kids and their own mortgages and stuff they have to deal with. So it's like I'm trying not to burden too many other people with, the woe is me type thing. I just, again, I don't need the sympathy. I just need the help. Just help us out.
Has there been like a lot of medical bills that come in with this?
Yeah, thankfully, my wife's insurance is fantastic. She works at the county hospital, JPS, so her insurance is great. But yeah, there's a lot out of pocket. There's a lot out of pocket. Probably the most significant has been a nanny versus childcare versus daycare. So we had talked to a couple of daycares around, like some nicer ones, and then we talked about it initially, but then they were just like, man, we're just not sure. Like the biggest concern with them is just other kids, right? If they're rough with her or whatever, there's a liability thing. It's like, okay, well that kind of sucks. But I think in the hindsight, that actually works a little better. So paying a nanny is obviously a little bit more than childcare or daycare. So that's been a pretty significant one too. But so yes, to answer your question.
Yeah. So
yeah.
So if I'm a parent that realizes I'm going to have a kid with a disability and that's coming, and I come to you and I'm like, hey man, what's one piece of advice you could just give me? What would you tell a parent that is getting ready to have not just another kid, but their very first kid? Like you said, it's scary going into having one kid alone, going, man, this thing doesn't come with a manual, know?
Yeah.
Let alone this is going to require a lot more time, energy, and money than I would have ever even remotely anticipated. What is the one thing you would tell another parent?
Stay positive, man. Like you just have to, tomorrow's coming, it will come. Spending time in the NICU put a lot of stuff in perspective, kind of like what I was saying earlier.
Yeah.
You see some of these other kids and what they're going through, like right out of the womb. You're like, oh my God, man. And, you think of some of these, thankfully I have a flexible enough job and career that I can essentially do what I need to do from a laptop and from my phone, other than meetings and things like that, right? For the most part.
Yeah.
So I can post up sleepless nights in the NICU and do what I need to do for the most part. You see some of these other parents that are working, blue collar, 9 to 5s, hourly jobs. You're just like, how in the hell do you do this? I have so much more respect and kind of opened my eyes to, you can't just post up in a hospital if you're a construction worker, right? You can't just hang out there all the time. And so I think the biggest advice is, just you got to stay positive. You got to know that there's a lot of good that's coming out of that. And that, again, I hate using this as there's other people that are worse off than you.
Yeah.
There just is. There's always going to be somebody worse off than you in the world, and that's terrible for them. And I'm sorry, but you just got to count your blessings, right?
That's the funny thing about perspective too. Is anytime you're sitting there having a woe is me moment, you'll see, hear, or read, or watch something that goes, wow.
Yeah.
All things considered, I really don't have any problems.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And then that makes sense coming from you, because you're just one of the most genuine and positive and friendly people that I know. That's great, man.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, like it goes back to that. Like it goes back to just again, eternally optimistic and knowing that, there's always bigger and better things out there. Kind of go back to what you're saying is, like, we're spoiled as a country, right? These days, like talking about counting your blessings, and so I've said that before, and I remember sitting in the hospital, like just looking around the room, like, thank God we're here in Fort Worth, that we're here in Texas, that we're here in America, and we have this amazing medical, services, things. And I know it's expensive, and I know it's not a perfect system. I totally understand that. But at the same time, I'm just looking around this room and all of the care and the nurses and the doctors and this, this freaking equipment that who knows how much money it costs. I'm just like, modern medicine is the most amazing thing. It's just unbelievable what they can do with some of these like NICU babies, and that we have. The power is always on, that we have all these, plastic tubes. Where does plastic come from? Oil and gas. Like, when you're late at night at the NICU, you're just thinking all these random things. You're like, oh yeah, that's made of petroleum. Anyway. And so I already knew that about my, my take on America and me and all that kind of stuff. But everything was reaffirmed when we had kids. Like, thank God we live in America. Thank God we live in Texas, and we're surrounded by all these great things. And so, yeah. So anyway. Yeah, well, going on there. Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah. So let's go back to 20-year-old Jared. And there's a million things we would want to go back and tell ourselves,
Like
right?
a sophomore or junior in college? I don't even know, man. I don't even know what I was
If
doing.
there was one thing that you could go back, grab yourself by the ears and go, either do this or don't do this. If they're not going to listen to anything else, because naturally we wasn't at that age, there was just this one thing that you had to force yourself to listen to through your experiences in life now. What is that one thing you would tell yourself?
Oh my God. College and post-college, I think I said this before, I didn't know I was going to even get into oil and gas, even in college, and then, have a business and all that stuff. Be patient. It's probably the biggest thing, like you're always a little bit anxious, like something, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. Patience is knowing it's going to happen. And how's it goes? Like patience is knowing it will happen and giving it time to, right? That's like the big thing, is that knowing that these things will work out. And then like you really can't please everybody, right? And it goes back to what I was saying about most people are good at one thing, and you just need to stick to that. Like, don't be a Renaissance man. If there are people that are really, really good at that, being good at everything, right? But what I've learned when I personally try to veer off and to do some of these other things, I'm just like, why am I doing that? Like, I'm good at these handful of things. Just stick with that, and that's what I would probably tell my younger self, I guess. Like, hey, you're good at these things. Don't try to run down all these different paths and please all these different people. Like, just do what you're good at and stick with it, and you'll be fine, right? Easier said than done, especially running a business. You've got a million things going on, right? Yeah. But I think that's what's good with my partner and I, is that he's really good at some things, I'm really good at other things, and that the yin and the yang work really well. And so that's probably what I would tell him, along with all these other things. Hey, don't do this on this day. Don't do this on this day. Ignore that. And yeah. Good Lord, I could write a novel.
Oh, so the audience out here,
Yep.
How do they get let's say somebody wants to reach out to you. They're either looking for a job, or they're looking to be an investor, or they're just want to learn more about you, want a fellow parent that wants to talk to another parent that has a kid not born in a normal way. How does somebody get a hold of you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, just Jared Clark, Fort Worth. Probably pretty simple search in the LinkedIn little search box there. Our website, forzaresources.com. I've got a link to our inquiry page, and my email, I think, both of our emails are on there. And I'm always at the Fort Worth Club with Jeremy, so you can find me up there. I need to get there more often. With COVID, it's been a little more difficult.
It's been a little weird, hasn't it?
But I need to get up there more often. But yeah, always looking to make a new relationship with people. I love people. I love being around people. Again, either professionally, socially. I just like getting out and meeting folks. So yeah, happy to.
Man, thank you again for coming on. I appreciate your time.
Happy to do it, man. Yeah.
Looking forward for that next beer at the club.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks so much. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks, brother.
All right. Yeah, that's good.
Dude, this is great.
I like that.
That was great.